Let me guess, you like the new movie.
Oh, I loved it so much. But I can't wait for the next part of the trilogy. I need more Dune right now.
Well, if you're sure.
A beginning is a very delicate time.
That's right, let's talk about Dune. Not Dune, the only movie series that seems to have escaped the great franchise collapse of the 2020s. No, I'm talking about Dune, directed and written for the screen by David Lynch. For decades, this was the only big screen adaptation of Frank Herbert's acclaimed novel, and boy oh boy is it something. Does it capture the crazy, drug-fueled wildness of the Duneverse? You bet it does. Does it capture anything else? Well, we're gonna talk about that.
All right, as promised, we're talking about Dune. We didn't lie last time.
Monkey's paw.
Technically, the truth is still the truth. But yeah, because like we knew that this movie is going to be a pretty much the biggest release of the year so far. But you know, everybody's kind of talking about it, and we thought it'd be more interesting to talk about this version of Dune, because I had not seen it before. You had seen this one.
Yeah, it's seared into my brain.
And now it is seared into mine. And to kind of give like a little bit of background, like kind of our other opinions of like other versions of Dune. I've not read the book. I started the book, and then I got like 3 pages in, and I thought, I've had to look at the glossary 12 times. I think this is not the right time for me to read this book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've made it through the book. I think that's maybe the best way to put it. I appreciate what he's going for. That kind of really dense, like sci-fi, like cerebral, like 70s stuff is not really my cup of tea. And I was in a similar situation where it's like, okay, if I'm having to reference the glossary twice a page and then sometimes like sub-reference another glossary entry to understand what that one was saying, it's like, okay, you can stop making up terms. Like, they can ride a bicycle, it's fine. That doesn't ruin my suspension of disbelief or anything. But like, if you can get through all of that, and I know that, you know, some people totally dig that, there's, you know, interesting enough ideas that he's dealing with. I'm not going to read any more of his other books, though, or his sons.
I've heard that they get really, really weird a few books in.
Mm-hmm.
And then with these new movies that have come out, but directed by, I always forget how to pronounce his name.
Denis Villeneuve.
Directed by Denis Villeneuve, yes. And I've taken to these new movies really well. I know that you're a bit more lukewarm on them.
Yeah.
Or might I say you're more Duke-warm on them?
No. No.
I'm sorry. No, that was a stretch. That was a stretch.
The Duke was not very warm much the way into the film.
Coming to this one, though, there is so much that's going on with this version of Dune that David Lynch made. And the thing is that this kind of had a messy production, though.
Mm-hmm.
I took a look. Again, this is just kind of me looking at Wikipedia, so this isn't like super in-depth or anything. Apparently, the original rough cut of the movie was 4 hours long. And obviously, like, rough cuts aren't the end-all be-all. But David Lynch got down to 3 hours. He's like, okay, I am feeling okay with this. And then the studio came and said, no, you need to take another hour out of the movie to make it 2 hours long. And you can feel that. You can really feel that.
Oh, yeah. You can definitely take all of, like, it took Villeneuve, almost 5 hours to tell the story. We can do that in 2/5 of the time. It's fine.
It is, yeah, because again, with this being such a dense story with so much going on, I tried talking about this story to someone else. It's like, oh, I have no idea what happens in Dune. Tell me what happens. And just going from, like, the new movies, my knowledge there, it took me like 5 minutes to get to, okay, that's the background information. Here's what the story is.
Mm-hmm. It's a lot of groundwork to lay.
Yeah. But yeah, there's 4 cuts of this movie floating around.
I know, so there's a theatrical, there's a television re-edit, like, with stuff that he disavowed, and I know there's been, like, rumors of, like, he was wanting to do a director's cut, but I don't think that's ever, like, precipitated.
Yeah, it's like, from what from, like, my surface level skimming that I saw, apparently, like, people would would ask him, hey, do you want to go back and revisit Dune? And he would tell them to go fuck off. Because he was like, I don't want to worry about that. But apparently, just within the last year, he said, it's been long enough. I might look at maybe coming to the footage again and seeing what I can do with it.
That'd be interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, but it'd be cool to kind of get that after all this time. Especially now that it's much more in pop culture now. Like, it's much more... because the new movies are a lot more accessible, but we'll talk about that more in a bit.
Yeah. I will say it would be nice to finally get an overindulgent long director's cut from someone who actually deserves to have one.
I'll give David Lynch however many hours of my time that he wants. Like, Zack Snyder wants, 6 hours for his stupid
Christ.
Rebel Moon movie? I'll take the 6-hour long Lynch. Just the thing is that all of those other 4 hours are just going to be the woman floating in space giving us more exposition at key points.
I mean, it's really the foundation of the entire movie.
Yeah, that's just like the opening for this. Is just this one, she like tells us stuff that's going on, and then she kind of fades out. She's like, oh, by the way, and then she fades back in to tell us more.
I think it really does kind of set the stage for what you're gonna get, for good or ill. Like, you get like Princess Irulan, and she's like the most like 80s like high fantasy sci-fi like look, and then you get this weird like matting and her fading in and out erratically, or like, are they asleep at the wheel? Like, what the fuck's going on? And that's just like pretty much what the rest of the movie is. Like, I'm intrigued visually, but I'm very confused at the same time.
I actually totally forgot that was supposed to be like the Princess Irulan until you just said that. I'm like, oh yeah, that isn't just a random narrator movie. Like, she was supposed to be a character who just doesn't exist after this point.
Yeah, I mean, that is kind of a there are some elements of this just Frank Herbert story that are just difficult to overcome. Like, Irulan and the Emperor just aren't in the story until like the very end, and like you have other factors that I think are like, even if you look at either of these iterations, like it's a kind of a bit of a hurdle to clear.
Yeah.
So yeah, like she's gone.
Yeah, you can't make a movie with things just happening, and then in the little corner you say you define every word as it gets you.
Yeah. No, like this is
they
really
start popping
intense.
But I did notice, in a way that this kind of differs from the more modern ones, is that this movie kind of opens up with the cards being set on the table right away. It's like, oh yes, the Emperor has the plot to destroy House Atreides, and he's going to explain how this happens. Yeah. And that kind of results in there being not as much intrigue as the newer movies, where you're kind of like, oh, what's going on? There's some weird stuff going on that we're not sure about. Whereas in this one, like, oh, we get more, it does create more dramatic irony, because you're like, oh, they're walking into a trap, that blade is right over their head at all times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the sword of Damocles is like really obvious. It's interesting because like in this adaptation, in Lynch's Dune, like even the Atreides pretty much know that they're walking into a trap. Like there's the same like, like let's clear out any surveillance stuff. But like when they're on Caladan, they're like, yeah, the Duke's probably going to get fucking assassinated. Like they're all remarkably chill with this as compared to the other.
It's okay, son. You're the pawn at the end of the board. You're gonna get there. You're gonna be okay. So it just does have that different kind of feeling to it. And that's something that I kind of like, being able to see between different adaptations of the same source material, like what moods they go for. Because again, like while there isn't the same kind of like intrigue for the audience, it does still kind of create that tension, like, oh, when things are going to happen, when the hammer's going to fall, like I said before. And just like kind of comparing that, not necessarily saying, oh, which one is better, which one is worse. I mean, that said, I do have my own opinion about which adaptation is better, but that's outside the scope of this discussion for now.
No, I think this is pretty much like, especially the first like maybe half hour, 45 minutes is like the most like direct example of kind of like a show versus tell approach. Like the 84 like loads you up with like all this information, like the emperor pretty much like gives like a little PowerPoint about like the Landsraad, like the power structure. Whereas with like Villeneuve, like for example, when they first like transfer the like custody or whatever of the planet, like you just see a bunch of people show up and you can like tell from their costumes that there's these various different like factions, but it's a lot more implicit. And then again, like you're saying, like the political intrigue is kind of more under the table and sort of you're kind of discovering it alongside Paul as opposed to being told about it ahead of time, just to kind of have that in the back of your mind.
Right, and it's a very, and they each have their own, again, like each approach kind of has its own strengths, because for something as wordy, as heady, as dense as Dune, a telling approach can have its own merits. And I will say, like, the one advantage I think this movie does have is that it leans into the weirdness of Frank Herbert's imagination a lot better. Like right from the get-go, we see this navigator being brought in this massive tank, and you're like, oh, well, when they say that spice is addictive and that it causes mutations, they aren't kidding.
No. I am glad to see that the Eraserhead baby finally managed to find gainful employment, though. It's so weird looking. I love it.
Just this funky little puppet. And I love as it's leaving the Emperor's throne room, there's like one of the little attendants behind it, like with a little vacuum just going.
Just got a shop vac. Sorry for the goo.
It's like the whole, like the first half of this movie, I was unironically kind of loving it. Because it just gets, it has like these great costumes. I love like the designs of everything. It has that classic 70s, 80s sci-fi feeling. And I don't know, it's like, it's one of those things, like I'm nostalgic for that kind of stuff, even when I didn't grow up with it. I'm just like, oh, but so, I don't know.
Yeah, it's like of a part with like Labyrinth or, some like Henson film kind of idea. Or
yeah, that's a great comparison.
Yeah, just like this very tactile. It's like, I don't think even like detractors of this film, which are like entirely like justified at like probably most of the arguments, I don't think you could accuse this film of looking cheap. Like there's all these massive sets and it's very sumptuous, and it doesn't look sumptuous in like what might be like commonplace or acceptable like by today's vocabulary, but it's so intricate, and all these like models and the cool little creatures in the background and all these details. It's like somebody like thought through this whole thing, and it still feels very, like specific and lived in.
Yeah, so like, now that's like the digital effects.
Oh boy. There were some hard matte lines.
And again, this was 1984. They were still learning what computers were back then. It's. I mean, what? Like they were still like, when did they learn to make a hand in computer imaging? I don't know. But, it's like, it's those early kind of effects, and even those kind of have a charm in their own way. Again, it's the sci-fi of yesteryear, when you'll be like, oh my god, they made a cube floating in space. Mind blowing.
Yeah.
I also love the Gom Jabbar scene.
The pain!
The pain! In case you couldn't tell that there was pain going through him.
That's one of my, in my, trivia group chat, I use that gif, maybe twice a week.
It's this movie really kind of leans into the goofiness of it, and I think that's something that is very intrinsic to the story, because as much as it's trying to be heady and everything, you still have a character in there named Duncan Idaho.
Jesus Christ. Who looks like a fucking middle school teacher in this version.
I know, it's at least Jason Momoa, I'll give the casting of these modern movies, Jason Momoa kind of, he sticks out in the first Dune movie in just the right way.
Right.
The kind of way that somebody named Duncan Idaho should stand out in this world.
Yeah, I think the casting's really strong in that film. And in this film, it's really fun just because you see a lot of, his kind of regulars start to emerge. A lot of folks, you get a few, Twin Peaks cast members with, especially Kyle MacLachlan. And just some of his other, so it's kind of fun. Plus some really pedigree, and Max von Sydow's in it. Sean Young. So yeah, it's interesting.
Who was the guy that played Baron Harkonnen in this movie?
I don't have that off the top of my head. It is it someone I recognize? Kenneth McMillan, who is not, skimming through, he was in, the Salem Was Lot TV miniseries from '79. That's one of the main things I read. Dog Day Afternoon. Just kind of it looks like he's more of a character actor for a lot of stuff, but he's a lot. The Harkonnens are so fun in this movie.
Oh my god, I know. I was because in the new movies, it's kind of yes, they're horrible, awful tyrants, but they're still at least kind of ruling still. And here, it just feels like their daily schedule is just causing chaos.
They're just fucking around. The introduction of Vladimir Harkonnen is wild. He just pulls the plug out of some guy's chest, it's covered in blood, and then just yeets himself to the ceiling. And they're that's how you do a character entrance. And then Fade Ralpha is constantly, Sting's eyebrows are insane. His crazy just acting.
Oh my god. I also have to say the music done by Toto, of Africa fame. And this music is just, it knows when it needs to go hard, for sure.
It's definitely 80s. But it fucking rips.
Oh my god. It's once he gets to Arrakis, and there's kind of some different stuff that the story, and again, having not read the book, I might be able to speak more to this, but they put a lot of emphasis on Paul's father, the Duke, has a lot of emphasis on his ring. And I guess that's supposed to be the symbol of his authority. But was there that much focus on it in the book? I don't remember that specifically. My recollection of this is very specific in some regards, and then completely hazy. It's these weird primordial memories of it, which is maybe how most people do. I was thinking about that after we watched that, and my only guess, short of it being in the book and I just don't recall, is more because obviously if he causes the extinction of House Atreides and takes Arrakis back, obviously that's all the authority, that power vacuum is all the authority he needs. My only thought was maybe it's more of because they've been at war with each other for centuries or whatever, so maybe it's more of a trophy or something for him, I defeated you and now I have the symbol of your authority that I have claimed for myself. But that was as much as I could get. it could be perhaps that like, it's like, oh, by taking the symbol of House Atreides, it's like for sure the extinction of the house.
Yeah, something like
and
that.
And as long as like I don't have the ring, that means someone else must have it, which means that people in the house must have survived. Maybe I'm not.
Yeah, that too, kind of the assurance or whatnot.
For all of the exposition this movie gives us, we could have had a little bit. Yeah, because so they get to Arrakis, and again, this movie just kind of keeps throwing more and more information at us, because we have the little hunter-seeker attack, which in this movie looks like what I imagine anti-vaxxers think vaccines work like.
It's coming for you.
And then after it gets foiled, then a Fremen woman working for the royal household goes, "Oh, that's nice. You saved my life. Anyways, here's my name, and here's your destiny, and here's something you have to know." Like, without skipping a beat.
It's just very like, all right, we got to keep this conveyor belt going. We've only got 2 hours.
And then, of course, the Harkonnens, they spring the trap. Dr. Yui. Yue?
They pronounce it all the ways, so I don't think there's an incorrect way to do it.
Dr. Y. He springs the trap. Harkonnens attack. They take Arrakis back. Paul and his mother are taken to the desert to be executed, but they outwit their captors. They get free.
It's kind of interesting, like, the way that they decided to, based on their, like, vision or creative vision, and also just what they could do, like, comparing, like, in this scene, for example, like, the handling of, like, the voice, like, this commanding voice that they have. Like, here, it's just this weird pitch bending, kind of like, they sound like they, like, the day after, like, a death metal concert, they've been screaming too much or something. And like, as compared to like with Villeneuve, you have the kind of like the like lower voice and the menace to that, but then that kind of like the like almost like falling effect that it has, like it affects like the edit of the film, which is interesting.
Yeah, because it's like, because in the new movie, it's like it's a bit more just like it's. I guess the only way I can describe it is that it's an audible, bold italic.
Yeah, something like that.
Whereas in Lynch's Dune, it's more like, it's like they mess with the levels a lot to kind of, it's like, I don't know, make it sound like this. And another thing that's kind of interesting is talking about comparing between the adaptations, because if I remember correctly, in Dune Part 1, it was just like two grunts that were taking Paul and his mother to be killed in the desert. But in Lynch's Dune, they keep it more personal. So it's the two Harkonnen, the younger Harkonnen men, who are taking them personally.
Yeah, it's kind of difference in personnel and whatnot. I don't.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, but go ahead.
I didn't have anything.
Oh. And I think it, with this one, it does kind of make it, again, more personal. Because it's like, oh, these guys, they are, they're doing this thing personally to our hero, Paul. So we're going to root for them to fall even harder in the end, And so they get free. And then Paul has a vision. And you can see the part where you're like, okay, this is directed very much by David Lynch. I guess a little trippy, you could say.
And that's like part of the issue is like he like does these, which are fine. Like they're these weird things. They're almost a little too declarative. Like if it were just imagery, it might be a little more effective or something, but far be it for me. But like he's getting these visions like from the second that he like leaves, and it's like almost like too much at first. You're just like, wait, you should like maybe step us into this a little bit more, but it's some visions, all right.
Like that, this movie does not care if you're not following.
Yeah, it's just like,
along.
fuck you. Just, I'm going to drag you along by the collar.
Like, honestly, I feel like if I didn't have the framework for the story already from the newer movies, I think I would have been totally lost.
Oh, yeah,
in
no,
this version.
No.
I was like, what is happening? I was still asking that, even having that background knowledge. I was like, what is going on? What is happening? I am scared. So he kind of gets like, oh, this is the thing I need to do now. This is my destiny. And then they go meet with the Fremen. And up to this point, like, the Fremen have virtually not been in the movie. There's been a couple people working in the household. But with the newer movies, you know, the Fremen are kind of established as their own, like, their own entity pretty early on. Like, we meet Stilgar earlier on. We meet, we get this idea like, oh, there's all these people. This is how they organize themselves. Here's a situation with them. They feel like more of a presence before Paul has to go to them for help. Whereas in this movie, it's just kind of like, oh, yeah, these people are out there. There's a couple of them right here. All right, time to go be their leader.
Yeah,
be their new god king.
It's hilarious. Like, just how quickly Stilgar, like, shows up, and he's like a puppy dog. Like, I just met you, you're my best friend. He, like, is immediately, okay, here's your secret name. Here's your, like, you want a war name, and you're part of the club. Like, okay.
I just met you, and I love you.
Yeah, great. Like, you know, and again, a lot of this is due to time, but they're like, this is like from this point toward the end until the end of the film, like, for every one scene, there's this feeling that, like, there's probably anywhere between like 2 and 5 that are missing.
Yes, like, this is where you can really feel that stuff has been cut. Because for the first half of the movie, it's like, there's a lot going on. It was like, okay, like, I'm still kind of enjoying it, but then we hit here and it's just like, oh, here is Shawnee, and now they're making out the next scene. Like, what?
Yeah, I feel like, I guess, like, if I were in panic mode and having to, like, you know, cut my film, like, essentially in half or remove a third of it, like, the opening half of the movie is so dense that you kind of do feel the need to retain all of that, because it has all of the information to, like, understand the basic mechanics of the world. Whereas, like, the second half, like, if you just, like, trace plot points out, like, it's pretty simple. Like, there's some training that goes on. There's, like, him building a relationship with Chani and with the rest of Fremen, and then the whole, like, final confrontation, right? So if all I have to do is get those points out, this is what I would do, but you lose the development of what happens, and that's what, like, makes it interesting or makes it, like, coherent. You know, like, developing trust with the Fremen and learning their ways and stuff, which here it's just like, okay, go.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think it's the smartest decision to make given this constraint. But I think the real smartest decision would have been from the people one level up to not give this constraint in the first place.
Right.
And mostly because, again, having not read the book, maybe you can kind of shed some more light on this, but it does feel like from the 2 adaptations, and even in the one that I overall like more, it does feel like the story's more interested in having the characters kind of move to where they need to be for the plot to unfold, for the grand themes to be drawn out, rather than, like, the personal kind of character drama that's going on there.
Yeah, I Villeneuve does a far better job of a far better job and a job at all of addressing, like, the actual, like, subtextual thematic content about, like, subjugation and, you know, the white savior narrative and kind of, like, subverting that or whatever, like, finding fault there. From what I recall of the book, I don't think Frank Herbert was terribly interested in the organic nature of things either, really, from what I could tell. A lot of it's kind of that trippy, like, 70s writing where I'm like, I don't really fully process what the fuck's going on, but, like, it does have that same inevitability to it. And it might partially be by design, because that's kind of what it's about, is like pointing this out and then saying, okay, this isn't great, but that doesn't make it more interesting to watch as a narrative piece of fiction or read.
Yeah, and I think that you hit the nail on the head there with that word, inevitability, because it kind of feels like in both of the versions of the story that I've consumed, it does kind of feel like, oh, Paul has to face this challenge, and he overcomes it very easily, because of course he does. It is inevitable.
Right. Like like Paul learning to ride the sandworm is one of the funniest sequences in this entire movie. Like, it's phenomenal. The little like fake Kyle MacLachlan like going up the thing, just like the score going crazy as he's just kind of standing there like chilling. Like, it's like immediate. Like, that's like they join. Jessica like does the the water of life transformation thing. He does this, or like this. They've known these people for like 15 minutes. Like, Jesus Christ. But I will say, like, aside from it obviously like having much more like characterization like baked into it and much more like organic pacing, the Timothée Chalamet learning to ride a sandworm sequence, aside from it being a lot more visceral and like technically less hilarious, like it kind of had the same feel in and of itself. So overcoming this inevitability is really hard in any form.
Yeah, like because it had like, the more spectacle to it, like more of the build up, things like that. The digital effects have aged. Amazingly. The digital effects have advanced a little bit since the 80s. But it definitely did still have that thing. I was like, he did it. Okay, that was pretty easy, I guess.
Right.
So like I think that's something that's kind of baked into any kind of iteration of the story, I would imagine.
Sure, in some way. And just kind of how do you try to overcome that if you're interested in doing so?
Yeah. Because I do like with the newer version of this movie, like there is a bit more like he tries to make it a little bit more character driven here and there. Like Paul's like, oh, I don't want to do this, but things are kind of forcing my hand, so I'm going to take this decision I know I'm going to regret, and then things go from there. Whereas in this one, it is just like, here we go.
Yeah.
Also, their guns use words.
Oh, God. Yeah. That was a new thing, because like in the book, Paul gets trained in like the weirding way, which is like a fighting technique, like, martial art kind of situation. And so my guess is like this, whatever the fuck this thing was called, weirding weapon, whatever. Like, they're like, we don't want to have it be like, martial arts, so we're just gonna have a gun, and we're just gonna, they're gonna shout, and that'll make it shoot things.
I like that Paul's name itself is apparently like, his name is a killing word. He is the Messiah.
I preferred it when they were just making shouting nonsense syllables. That was amazing. Just all like fucking Patrick Stewart and like all these people, just like the indignity of it all was amazing.
Patrick Stewart's in this movie. Oh my God.
How many fucks do you think he gave this entire time?
You know how many fucks you have to give to be like, come, my men, I will hold my pug in one hand, my gun in the other, and we will charge against the enemy.
It's phenomenal.
Maybe they were filming like Star Trek in like the studio next door, and he accidentally wandered onto the wrong set, and they're like, oh, it's easier to just put a credit in there. We'll deal with it later.
They're doing like an early pilot. They're like, maybe that won't work out. I'll jump on this bandwagon instead.
Oh, the thing with the guns, it kind of reminds me of. Do you might be too old to remember this. This is like, this is something my little brother watched.
Okay.
But there was this PBS kids show called like Word World, where like they just say spell words and then it turns into objects. I'm just picturing now.
No.
It's just like put together word gun.
It's a killing word. No, we were a PBS
Blaster.
household, but that does not ring any bells.
Yeah, like I said, like it was. I think like it came out like a couple years after I aged out of that
Mm-hmm.
programming block. I only know about it because my little brother watched
Right.
it. And I was like, this is lame. This is lame. Cool kids watch Cyber Chase. Thank you very much.
Gotta wait.
Also, Shawnee is terrible in this movie.
Like, what? Poor Sean Young. What? She was just there. I like actively would forget that she was even a character and then be like, who's that lady? Oh.
And it's like, oh. Because, like, you know, with the new one, like, they kind of do the Hollywood thing, so where it's like, oh, we've done a thing together. We're in love now.
Mhm.
But at least they did a thing
Yeah, there's,
together
like,
before they were at
some
that point.
impetus to this whole thing.
Like, there's at least something. Like, come on.
But again, like if I'm in hurry up mode, I'm like, you don't need. They're just gonna kiss, and we're just gonna move on, and we're just gonna start the next scene. We've already lost 2 minutes.
The cut hour is actually
It's just
Paul
porn.
giving her it. It's Paul giving her the sand monologue.
Oh, God. If there was more
that
of Sting's like weird Speedo in the cut version, they need to restore that immediately because that was ludicrous.
He just walks in.
He's just
standing there,
just
just
him
like,
wandering around, going through his day.
and then his uncle's just staring at him, and like, oh, this makes me very uncomfortable. Also, there's a cat milking machine.
The cat milking that stayed in.
I almost forgot about that, and now I just saw it like, oh God, that's right. The Harkonnens are just really weird people.
It's amazing.
Also, so again, I don't know
Mm-hmm.
how it goes in the book, but Paul's sister, who in the recent movies, like we get to the end of Dune, that story, and she's still like unborn, but she like psychically she's speaking through her mother, whereas in Lynch's version, she is born prematurely using psychic powers.
Yes. And then ages rapidly like Renesmee in the Twilight movies.
Oh my god. That's how you know we're
That's
talking
not a
about
movie I
good
wanted to
here.
invoke.
But yeah, it's like
She's honestly my favorite part of the whole movie. She's so creepy.
she's so good. Just kind of be this little like honestly, if I was the emperor of space, the known universe, and I saw this little like 10-year-old girl walk in a little dress and be like, "My brother is coming," I'd just be like, "You want the crown? Take it,
Yeah, be
take
like,
it. Just
I'm
leave me
out."
alone, please." And that's the thing, like this final act, it really kind of picks up because like as things are going so fast, like through like the Fremen and everything, I'm like, oh geez, like everything's just kind of rushing by. But then it picks up again, and it becomes really funny in the big climax of the movie.
I was like crying with laughter at a couple points. The scene where it just cuts to the Harkonnens and like Jack Nance has that weird like, I don't know if it's like an accordion or something, but he's just like operating it, and like Vladimir is like just spinning around in the air, and they're just,
Yeah.
I don't even know what's happening or why they're doing it, but why not? Again, that stayed in.
Like the music is blaring, like people are just like shouting, like they're shooting words out of their guns.
It's amazing.
And then the little psychic girl kills the Baron. He goes, ah! He's just like spinning through the air. The wall shatters. A giant worm eats him, and you're just like,
This is what I came
this
for.
is cinema.
Yeah.
We come to this place for magic.
They cut it down. I went in, I wanted to go see this in like the big Dolby screen, and the sound was fucking amazing. But it's shorter now. It's like awkwardly cut, and like whoever reduced Nicole like should be like brought to justice.
This will not stand. We are going to, I'm calling it right now. Everybody will rally behind me, and we're going to march on AMC, and we will force them to restore the full version of the monologue to all the movie screens. And then we'll go to the next chain and the next, and this will not spiral out of control. I promise.
A movie theater holy war.
Billions of box office dollars will die.
I mean, they're already doing a great job of that themselves, but we could help.
And I will say, because you kind of touched on this before, where because from what I understand of the books, is like Dune Messiah kind of starts to take a look at like, well, maybe Paul's not such a good guy after all. It's like that. It's kind of flipping that more on its head, like exploring that more.
Mm-hmm.
And in the current movies, they are already leaning pretty well into that.
Yeah.
Like Paul, like at the end of Dune Part 2, like Paul is just straight up a villain.
Yeah, in some ways, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, or I guess you could say like an anti-hero kind of thing. It's like, yay, he liberated us, and now
Yeah, he's kind of he's gone from questioning his role to just fully committing to this, regardless of whether or not he had thought it was morally right or just.
Yeah, he's just like, don't stop me, cause I'm having a good time. I'm having a good time. But yeah, like in this movie, this movie kind of ends. He's like, hey guys, I'm the emperor now, and I'm going to say we stop all the fighting and everything is okay. There's no holy war. We're good. Everything is okay. I am the hero.
He like makes it literally rain on Arrakis.
He's just...
Toto brings the rains down to Arrakis.
It was foretold!
I don't know if, as it was adapted here, obviously we don't know what was cut, given what we have. I don't know if they were ever really interested in that thematic subtext. It's more about like this space adventure politics end of it, like, and so in this one, like, it's kind of just like so he's like a god now, bye, we're done now.
Yeah, and again, that's not being like, oh, David Lynch didn't say this was problematic, cancel him on Twitter. It's like, no. It's like, if he does, he doesn't want to go in that direction. Like, he kind of cut out the billions dying in a holy war kind of a thing. Is just like, oh,
yeah, that was just like never on the table.
Yeah, it's like he rallies people that are oppressed. He stops the people that have wronged him, and yay, the desert is green now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's more about like the internal kind of good versus evil of like this specific conflict versus like Dune, as you get into Dune Messiah, I presume, is more about like the like literally cosmic implications of this kind of story. Like, what are the ripple effects of that?
Yeah, and I feel like both adaptations here definitely have their own merits, because while I kind of like that the newer ones like kind of dig into a little bit more depth, like they have like, more stuff going on with the characters. Mm-hmm. Kind of like, hey, they're leaning into the later books going, maybe Paul's a little bit of a monster, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But with this one, with David Lynch's Dune, I like that it leans more into the weirdness of it, that we get more of like, I don't know, it's very entertaining at the least.
Some mostly intentionally, sometimes on accident.
Sometimes it's very hard to tell the difference. But I like so it kind of has that. It has a personality to it, and I think that is something that can carry a movie far. Like, as much of a mess as this movie is, because like there's some points in this movie where the audio mixing itself is very rough.
Yeah.
Which is like really weird, because usually I haven't seen too much of David Lynch's filmography, but what I have seen of it, like, he's usually really good at this. So
yeah, he's really a sound guy.
Yeah, that might have been the point where like he was doing all right, and then it was specifically the point at the ending where you can tell that a lot of stuff was cut, that the audio gets rougher. So I think that might have been the point where David Lynch was like, fine, whatever, just I'm not gonna put my name on this thing anyways.
Yeah, it's sort of like, I know he was kind of starting to feel a lot of pressure, as it was like a really long production, and especially by the time you're in, you know, post, doing all the sound mixing, all that kind of stuff. And like, I wonder if he was just kind of not feeling it at that point. Because yeah, like, I mean, like, Eraserhead, his first movie, like the way that it uses the soundscape to like create this like really just sort of sense of dread, or in Mulholland you have some really interesting stuff, and Twin Peaks is some of the most scary goddamn just use of atmosphere in that, you know, series and in the limited series. So yeah, like he knows what he's doing. So like when it's so out of control like this, it's like, okay, I'm curious as to like where everything was in the production.
Right, you know, and I feel like, you know, that was the point there. So I think that was the point where he was probably, like you said, kind of given up on what was going on here, which is a shame. But I won't really hold that against him. But so while, you know, there's like a lot of stuff in this movie that's very messy, stuff that doesn't really work super well, I would love to watch it again because it is just... I don't know what that laugh was.
It's what it is.
It is what it is, and what it is definitely, most assuredly, Dune. Yeah. So any final thoughts on Dune T84? Why did I say that? Any final thoughts on this movie?
Yeah, I mean, I think broadly speaking, it's always interesting to look back at these, like either critical flops or commercial flops or whatnot, and like with respective time and distance, be like, is there like anything redeeming about this that's interesting? I mean, I think like in parallels, I know like the Criterion Channel currently have like a Razzies like little kind of collection with like Freddy Got Fingered and Showgirls and stuff, and like there is interesting stuff in these movies. It's like, it's fun to punch down on them, but it's also kind of fun to like see what the fuck was going on with the production. And then more importantly, so assuming Dune Messiah does come out, and it honestly at this point it has to, because I strongly dislike the ending of Dune Part 2, especially if that is just how it ends. But if Dune Messiah does come out, Denis Villeneuve has a very important and final chance to correct perhaps his greatest error, which is, I want a goddamn freaky mutant space guild navigator in that fucking movie. Like, I haven't gotten one. He's been cowardly so far, and now is his chance to finally grow a pair and give me a weird space baby. Please.
We need the weird... Hashtag... Put the weird space baby in Dune Messiah.
It's only what's right.
But yeah, like it's and I do think that he did explicitly say that he wants to make this a trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
So if they, you know, like if Dune Part 2, I don't think it's like spoilers for us to say, like, yeah, it's like an open ending. They're leading it into the third part. As long as we get a conclusion there, then that's fine and everything. But we better get that. I don't think they've officially greenlit it yet. It's the same thing where like they did Part 1, they didn't greenlight Part 2 until a couple weeks afterwards to make sure they made money.
Right. I don't think they had to worry too much about that.
So David Zaslav, if you are listening to this, I swear to fucking God, If there's any fan base you don't want to mess with.
Jesus.
It's the one that follows the movies about the Holy War. But with that, yeah, I really enjoyed this, and honestly, I think that I'm going to try to take another crack at the book soon, because now that I have the kind of framework in mind, I have these things in my head, I won't have to look at the glossary every page anymore. And I can come back.
Wait till you get to the Butlerian Jihad, then you're like, what the fuck's going on?
But yeah, so yeah, thank you so much for joining me for this discussion tonight, Reynard.
Yeah.
And thank you all of us. Thank you all. I'm gonna have to do so much cutting on this. Thank you all of you at home for listening this week. We had a lot of fun talking about this movie. If you want to see more of us, I'm Daniel Goldhorn here on Daniel Goldhorn on YouTube.
And I'm Reynard/Cinema on Tumblr.
And we'll see you all in a couple weeks. You take care.
Bye.